Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our special show Reset India, where we talk about all those sectors which need a lot of reshaping, reimagining, restructuring as well, and the focus areas also. Now, one of these focus areas is education. Education which needs to be obviously of quality and the access to education as well. We've seen how during the COVID-19 pandemic, the impact on education sector has been huge in various terms, although there has been a new aspect of use of technology which has come to the forefront, but the actual physical classrooms are just starting to open in various states and various corners of the country. We'll take all those aspects in mind and we'll have an informed opinion, expert opinion from our guests as well. But before we do that, let us first bring you some facts as to how the education sector stands right now. Let us start with some of the government initiatives, most of them, which started during the COVID-19 pandemic to try and take care of this entire situation which arose out of that. And one is PM e-Vidya. It was announced on 17th of May 2020. Now, this aims to unify efforts related to digital, online or on-air education, all in an effort to go ahead and tackle the challenges which were posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the next one, if we are trying to look at, is the Diksha initiative as well. That is digital infra for providing quality education or e-content in states and union territories. Now, this is also equally significant as far as the use of technology is concerned. Let's look at some more initiatives here as well. For example, the QR coded energized textbooks for all grades is something which is worked on. One TV channel for each class from class 1 to class 12 as well. And then, extreme use of or rather extensive use of radio, community radio, CBSC, podcasts, Shikshawani as well. E-content for visually and hearing impaired, one segment of our population which obviously has to be focused upon specifically. Then e-content on digitally accessible information system, and obviously National Digital Library, Diksha, e-Pathshala, e-PG Pathshala and virtual labs as well. Now, these are some of the online resources which were brought in public domain, wherein students and teachers could access the content during the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's also take a look at one very interesting aspect here, an important one, that is the new education policy. Let us bring you some of the highlights of the new education policy, because that is something which is going to form the structure and the basis from here onwards. Now, it says exposure to vocational education in schools and higher education is going to be one focus area as far as NEP 2020 is concerned. Then, obviously, we're going to look at, aimed at ensuring universal access to all levels of schooling as well, quality childhood care and education for children 3 to 6 years. That one particular segment, the formative years, which we call as far as education is concerned, 5+3+3+4 curricula and teaching structure. Now, this is the structure which the NEP 2020 has, suggested, an equitable and inclusive education as well. So these are certain points, and apart from that, if you look at there is also the emphasis on socially and economically disadvantaged groups. That is something which the NEP says that the focus has to be there on these groups when we talk about the education sector specifically. Also, the target is achieving 100% youth and adult literacy. Now, that is really, really important there. And last but not the least, if you look at all these points there from the NEP 2020, then they all form the basis of how the education system will work from here onwards. Let's now, introduce our guests to you. Let us bring them in picture here. The experts wherein we will try and understand all aspects of the education sector. Professor M. Jagdish Kumar, Vice Chancellor of Jawaharlal Nehru University, is joining us. We also have with us Mr. Narayan Ramaswamy. He is partner and leader for education and skilling sector at KPMG India. And we're also joined by Dr. M.K. Sridhar, President of the Center for Educational and Social Studies, Bengaluru, member of UGC, and also a member of the drafting committee of the National Education Policy. Welcome, all of you gentlemen, to Rajya Sabha Television. Let me begin with you, Dr. Sridhar. And let's start by understanding the state of affairs as far as education sector is concerned and the position where we stand right now, both in terms of access, quality, structure, as well as, the way we impart education and the students receive education at various levels.
See, first of all, the annual survey on higher education, AISHE, every year brings out a lot of data with regard to the state of affairs, with regard to students, institutions, and things like that. Whereas in case of school education, there is a UDICE data that is now universally accessible to everyone. But let me just get into a little qualitative aspects. One is basically the kind of education that we have today at school level as well as at higher education. Initially, after independence, there was the first policy in 68, second policy in 86, which was later on slightly amended with plan of action. And after 34 years, a national education policy is happening. So therefore, the very fact that another national education policy is coming after an effort of 5.5 years itself speaks that the situation is not safe and it requires complete overhaul in all respects. So therefore, the very fact of this having the policy itself is an indicative of the status. And if you go around and talk to people and how are things, then everybody is feeling very unhappy. Everybody is feeling let down. All their aspirations are not being taken care of. So therefore, any section of the society, if you ask them, it's not up to the mark. That's what they say.
Okay.
So therefore, the policy, the kind of response that we have received before the policy, during the policy, and after the policy, I think it is phenomenal. Therefore, it means there are a lot of aspirations of people which want to be addressed by this policy. This is what I personally feel the state of education in India today.
Okay. We'll talk about other aspects as well in terms of how those various sectors as far as education is concerned can be taken care of. Let's also bring in the other two guests, Mr. Narayan Ramaswamy. Your views? Would you agree with what Dr. Sridhar is pointing out there, that there is a lot which needs to be done as far as the education sector is concerned?
Absolutely, without any doubt. In my view, this is nothing short of revolutionary. What Mr. Sridhar and the entire team has done, this new national education policy, in my view, is not just going to transform the education sector. It's going to transform the human resources that this country is going to have 15, 20 years from now. And I do see a big change in the way we will participate in the global economy thanks to this national education policy. I think it is much needed, and I'm glad that it happened. And before this call, I was telling half in jest, I wish I was 25 years younger. I could be part of this education system. That is how much I think we need it.
Okay, definitely. Professor Jagdish Kumar, your initial comments there, sir, on the state of affairs as far as education sector is concerned. It's not only about school education, but also higher education institutes as well.
Mm-hmm. Right. Let me give you a simple example to understand what was the situation before and what is that we are aiming at by bringing this new education policy. Imagine there are three kids. One is taller, one tall student, and one medium height student, and one short student. All of them went to a zoo, and they are trying to look at an animal behind a fencing wall. The tall student, being taller than the fencing wall, can easily see the animal. And the another student who is about the same height as the fencing wall is struggling to see that animal. And the third student who is very short cannot see. Now the zookeeper, he brings a bench and gives this to these kids. But the tall kid, when he stands on the bench, it doesn't really help because he can already see. But the second child who is just above the fencing wall can now easily see. But the third child who is shorter, he cannot see because the bench height is not sufficient. Earlier in educational policies, when we were trying to improve our educational systems, we were trying to provide one-fits-all kind of solutions. But what is actually required is to recognize that each child, each student has different requirements. Can we, for example, in this example of three kids that I have said, the tall child doesn't require any bench or any help. On the other hand, the middle child, he requires a stool of certain height, and then the shorter child requires a stool which is taller than the other stool, so that all three of them can see. The new education policy is trying to bring in this equity.
Okay.
Equity in that every student requires a different, they have different kind of requirements, and we need to provide different kind of opportunities and solutions to them so that they become better learners. So the good thing about the national education policy is it has included a lot of flexibility to make sure that the education and the teaching learning processes in the educational institutes, they are adapted in such a way that they meet the requirements of every student. So that is the uniqueness of the national education policy.
Okay, okay, definitely. That's quite rightly, and aptly pointed out by Professor Jagdish Kumar there, clearly that one size doesn't fit all, and it's not only just about equality, but equity is also equally important there. Dr. Sridhar, from your point of view, since you put the first response where, in terms of there seems to be a lot which needs to be done. So what are the key focus areas where we need to focus? And the NEP talks about some of them as well. But if we have to, just look at the areas which need to be focused upon in the months, years to come, say, for example, 4 to 5 years to achieve the desired, target or get the desired results.
See, what I feel is this policy is a kind of a complete, comprehensive, integrated, and for the vision of next 20 years, 2040. At the same time, we also need to take into account that everything cannot be done immediately. So many things are said in the policy. So therefore, what we felt that it will take its own time, maybe 7, 8, 10 years, for all these things to be put into practice. And we need to see the experience of functioning of this system, whole system for 10 years. And by 2040, we need to have a review so that how this has went on and what is to be done. In the meanwhile, there are many things which we have to do, a lot of mid-course correction. That is also very much there. So what I feel, either the governments or the various statutory bodies, state government, central government, and there are any number of institutions, and there are any number of universities, colleges, schools, and also individuals like stakeholders, like teachers, authorities, and all that. I think there is a recipe for everybody, and there is a menu for everybody for us to chew it and take it forward. So we need to have a kind of prioritization, an integrated approach, and then getting into the details is what is needed. There are some macro and there are some micro. All these things put together, we need to drive towards the implementation. This is what I personally feel. A lot of effort has already gone in, but this is a general approach that we need to take.
Okay, indeed, the macro and micro elements both will have to be looked at there, and obviously, it has to be an integrated approach. Mr. Ramaswamy, I'd like to bring you in here on a related aspect, and that is the use of technology. This pandemic, the COVID pandemic period has taught us how technology can be used in various ways in several sectors, and in education sector, most of all, the use of technology has become really, really significant, really important there. So how can this amalgamation of technology and education can be, taken forward from here onwards when the schools are reopened, when we go back to the physical classroom, and it's happening, the classrooms are opening one by one, and, everything remains fine. By the next session, it'll all be normal. But when it becomes all normal, how can technology be used in an enhanced manner?
Sure. See, technology has been a disruptor in many sectors. I would say education was stoutly refusing to be influenced by technology. The education sector was refusing till some time. And I would say COVID-19 has been a blessing in disguise. Because of COVID-19 and the associated lockdown, now there is an all-round acceptance of technology and technology-based digital, online, all various formats of education being acceptable to various stakeholders. Acceptable to the student, acceptable to the teacher, acceptable to the parent, acceptable even to the regulator. We are now talking about online universities and related areas. But the way I look at technology is this is now challenging the tried and tested formats of education across the globe. This has nothing to do only with India. Across the globe, well-established institutions are now school education, higher education. Like, for example, why do we need a 300, 400 acre campus universities anymore? If technology can act as a bridge, countries like India would benefit immensely because we don't need that kind of capital. We don't need that kind of infrastructure to be together. But what it does, in my view, is this is a permanent change that is here to stay. Of course, we may not be doing online classes like we are doing during the pandemic, but it is never going to be like it was before, and in a positive manner. Let me also refer to what Professor Jagdish said. If you want to do this education for one, that is, if every single student needs to be addressed as if he or she is the only student for the educator, technology is the answer. So I would think we've just used one part of the technology, which is online classes, which is digital content. But there are other aspects of technology. For example, how do you use simulation as a technique? How do you use artificial intelligence for us to understand how each one is progressing in the way they are doing?
Okay.
How do you use predictive analytics to see which of the students are going to fail and how can we proactively correct them? So education sector, both inside the classroom and outside the classroom, is going to be immensely and irrevocably be influenced by technology.
Okay.
And I think that is going to help countries like India in a very, very big way.
Okay, indeed, that is really important. Let me bring in Professor Jagdish Kumar here as well. Professor Kumar, from your perspective, sir, if you have to look at how technology can make the education more equitable and inclusive both.
Right. See, I would like to look at it in a more holistic manner, because technology is just one of the components of providing high quality education to our students. Earlier, whenever we thought about quality education, we thought about curriculum, for example, good curriculum. But in the new education policy, we look at the quality with respect to education in a very, very holistic way. For example, the first and foremost requirement for children is if we want to provide quality education to them, they should be healthy, they should be well nourished, and the school ecosystem, the school environment should be conducive for better learning. For example, it should be clean, it should be safe, There should be minimum resources available to arouse that curiosity in the minds of the students. And of course, the curriculum should be well designed so that they acquire the basic skills at the early stage of their education. And as they progress, they actually acquire the life skills to be successful, not just as an individual, but as a member of the larger society or the nation. And more importantly, when we are talking about quality education, the teachers should aim at providing student-oriented education, child-oriented education. This is another very important thing. And any learning and teaching process includes designing skillful assessment processes so that the students are provided appropriate feedback to alter their the way they are studying so that they become better learners. And finally, education should also be geared towards our national goals. Okay. What are our national requirements? Are we preparing our students to meet our national goals? And most importantly, education should also create that sense of pride in their own country too. I think the national education policy has all these ingredients in order to provide better equity and also high quality education to the students. And your initial question, technology is just a tool. How we use and what is our intent in using this technology as a tool will ultimately lead to providing good quality education to our students.
Okay, definitely. Technology is a tool out there and it has to be used in a very effective and efficient manner there. One more question, Professor Jagdish, and that is about the higher education. The higher education institutes, our universities, our institutes of excellence there as well. There also seems to be, the experts believe that there is a need for a lot of improvement there. There is a room for some, work to be done. So, from your perspective, how do you think the higher education can also be, lifted up from the state where it is right now and brought at the global level where we need to make those, bridge that particular gap?
So the challenge is that in our country, we do have some outstanding institutes. During the last 50 years, we can proudly say that we have built these outstanding institutes. But my concern is the universities that are spread across the country, hundreds of state universities and private universities. And that is where we need to do a lot, both in terms of training the teachers to be effective teachers and also establishing the teaching learning processes where the students are able to question, critically think, and use the information that they are getting from different sources, synthesize it, and use this knowledge to find solutions to practical problems. I think this is what is lacking in our educational institutes. And as part of the national education policy, I believe that the top universities and the institutes in the country, they should handhold with these state universities and private universities and help them achieve greater standards in their education. And that has been missing for too long in our country.
Okay. Let me also bring in Dr. Sridhar here for the concluding comments here. But Dr. Sridhar, on the higher education part, as Professor Jagdish Kumar is pointing out, how do you believe we should move forward there?
There are a couple of areas with regard to higher education. One is the entire approach with which we have to approach higher education. That itself is a very, very critical thing. The macro level as well as at the micro level. As he rightly said, Professor Jagdish Kumar rightly said, one size fits all, that flexibility. Second thing is, it is the regulation and control which will improve the quality. But actually, the policy is trying to say, it is the autonomy, it is the flexibility, it is the decentralization, it is the uniqueness of individual institutions, etc., will really contribute to quality. In fact, many people think the three dimensions, access, equity, quality, they are different. They are contradictory. But if you really take the access, equity, and quality, they're all combined together. Because when you talk of access, you are talking about access to quality education. When you are talking about equity, you are talking about equitable quality education.
Okay.
Which has to be available to all. So therefore, I feel this policy in the days to come will address access, equity, and quality, all dimensions together.
Okay.
That is actually the need of the hour.
Okay, there it is. Thank you so much, Dr. M.K. Sridhar, as well as Mr. Narayan Ramaswamy and Professor M. Jagdish Kumar for sharing your valuable views and time with us and our viewers. As our panelists and experts were pointing out, these are certain areas and certain steps which need to be taken as far as making education equitable, qualitative, and accessible to all is concerned. There is a bit of a restructuring required, and the National Education Policy sets out the roadmap for the years to come as far as the education sector is concerned. We'll come back again with a different topic and a different focus area as far as reshaping and reimagining, restructuring is concerned. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.